Derek, could you do the roll call?
Certainly, thank you for that, Chair. Morning, everybody. Please note that the public section of this meeting will be recorded and it'll be published later online for public access. Can all attendees be aware that if they do not switch off their camera, they may be recorded for the whole meeting, and please mute your microphone when not speaking. The camera and microphone clearly should be switched on when you're ready to speak. I will now ask members to confirm their attendance once the name has been announced, so that this is clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded for the minute. Chair John Tomlinson, I have you. We've spoken. Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Bell.
Present and correct, sir.
With his very smart tie on. Thank you. Luan Grugion.
Morning, everyone. Hi.
Morning. Is Sandra joining us today, Alex?
No, Sandra's given her apologies.
Okay, and yourself, Alex, you've just confirmed you're here. Thank you. I'm here clerking. We should have John Forsyth for legal.
Good morning.
Some here. There we are, John. Good morning to you. We also have Councillor Dunbar joining us today for your information, Chair. We will also be joined by Michael Wilkie. Michael, are you with us?
I am, yes, here.
Yes, thank you. And Matthew Moore?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Good morning, Matthew. They are both from KPMG, as you anticipated, Chair. We have other officers and authors in attendance, and that completes the roll call.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. So welcome to those that have come along, to Leslie and Matthew and Michael. I don't think we have any other guests that are here, although Callum might have somebody when he does his report at 12, but we can find out at that point. So can we go on to any declarations of interest, please? Okay, not seeing anybody indicating, so we'll take that as none. And we don't have any exempt business today. And I don't think there's anybody would want to suggest that. Okay, so that's confirmed. Can we therefore go on to the minute at page 5, please?
Chair, can I just interrupt you? My apologies. Can we just highlight that there has been an additional circulation sent for this meeting, item 10, the audited accounts, and item 11, the external audit report, which have been issued late, but I know from yourself that you are satisfied in terms of 12.2 of standing orders that these can be admitted to this meeting.
Yes, okay, thank you very much, Derek. Yes, and there was the reasons for that were clear. Yes, but if we can record that, thank you, Derek. Okay, so to the minute at page 5, what I'd like to do first of all is accuracy of the minute. So it is quite long, so I'll take it in chunks of pages. Is there anything in pages 5 to 8? Okay, anything in pages 9 to 12? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody signal. And then in pages 13 and 14. Okay, so we can take that as an accurate record. Thank you. Any matters arising from that minute, please? Okay, I'm seeing Luan signal.
Yes, John, it was just to see about an update on page 7, where we spoke about the support for the Chief Finance Officer and you know, ensuring that there was sufficient support around him to fulfil his deputy duties and the Chief Finance Officer role. I don't know if there's a timeline for that report or if we can get an update today. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll hand over to Alex in a second, but in the business planner, we've got that coming, I think it's item 20 in the business planner, going to come in September's committee, the next committee, Luan. Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, we're working our way through that, so we'll get a report to the September wrap panel. Okay,
thanks, Luan. Yeah, I'm just going to highlight that bit, so you've done that for me. Thanks. Is there anything else in terms of a matter arising from that minute? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else signal. So can we go on to the business planner then, please? So that takes us to page 15 of the pack. Alex, hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. I think in terms of the June, the beginning of June and the 22nd of June, all those papers are on. If there's a paper to be reported, there was no relevant Audit Scotland reports to bring forward. There may be some for the next meeting, but certainly nothing at the moment. So I think we closed off that business planner in terms of this meeting. As highlighted, there's the duty, the Deputy Chief Officer impact on Chief Finance Officer role will be reported in September. And I think in terms of the financial regulations reviews, I would just remind members that we've included within the financial regulations now are the reserves strategy or policy for the IJB, and I'll also be reviewing that as we go through there. So I just wanted to remind members of that, given the fact that the reserves feature quite prominently within the accounts as it sits at the moment. So we will be updating that in September.
That's fine.
Nothing else from me, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, that's fine. I've got one, but I'll open it up for others first. Are there any questions on the business planner? Okay, I'll just ask my one then. It's at item 13, and I think Martin Allen is the lead officer around this, but it was just on the strategic objectives. I just wanted to clarify that aspect. So that's not applicable for coming today, and it says it will be included within the strategic plan review. Can we just clarify what will come and when, and how that relates to, because we do have the leadership team objectives today, just to be able to position that bit.
I was wondering if Alison was on. Is she here? Here she comes. Alison, have you got any information on that one? Alison's maybe struggling with technology.
Yes, yeah, we'll give it a moment to see.
She can't unmute.
Good excuse.
Yeah, hold on to that question, Alison, and we'll fit it in when we can speak with you. I don't mind if that's later on, and Derek will sort out the minuting. Is that okay, Derek?
Yeah, no problem, Chair.
Fine. Okay. So, any other points on the business planner? That's fine. Thank you. So, given Alex's request, can we go to items? Do you want to take item 10 and then 11, Alex, or do you want 11 first?
11 first, I think. I think if the external auditors went first, then that would give you the assurance of the accounts, and then afterwards, if you approve the accounts, that's where I would see it going.
Okay.
So pass over to Michael.
Please, yeah. So this is the supplementary pack now.
Thank you then. And just to start, apologies, our paper is late. By its nature, our work on the IJB and Aberdeen City Council is the earliest, I think, of any IJB or local authority in Scotland by a long way. So still, I think, an achievement for both us and for management to get to this position. So very much thanks to Alec and his team for supporting us being able to report in this way. I'll hand over to Matt in a second just to summarise our conclusions, but at the highest level, we are substantially complete with our work, having carried out the testing that we planned. There were no key changes to the planned approach, and subject to concluding a couple of small areas which are shown in red within the report that I don't expect to prove challenging, then we'll be in a position to issue our opinion on the financial statements alongside the Council in a few weeks' time. I'll just hand over to Matt though and let him summarise the conclusions from our work.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So in the report, there's an executive summary on page 3, which basically covers off some of the key highlights. So we plan to issue an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements, which is great news. You'll notice in the revised statements there was a late adjustment that has been made due to some additional income from Bonaccord Care. That's worked its way through the account, so we just need to make sure we document that clearly in our files, because that came quite late in the piece. But in terms of our understanding, we're assured that it is the correct treatment. In terms of financial management and financial sustainability, clearly the RJB, along with all public services, have been through a significant pressures and changes this year due to the COVID pandemic. The sort of the understanding at the beginning of the year to where we've finished at the end of the year, there's a clear movement from the original budget through funding changes driven through the government, and the outturn position, and you'll see a significant increase in reserves within the IJB, and that's from where we're sitting is clear, coming from late monies coming from the Scottish government down the chain, which will be needed to be spent into the current year, and also the additional income that was identified late, increasing some of the reserves that the RJB sit with. That will enable you to have the ongoing discussion of how those are going to be planned to be spent in the future. So I think from a financial sustainability piece, it's looking better from a reserves position. However, when looking in terms of the 5-year forecast, there is still savings and plans to be put through in the later years, in years 3, 4 and 5. So again, the current position is probably looking a little bit better than it was a year ago, but with still some significant pressures coming through. And within that financial sustainability piece, there's a clear understanding at the moment is actually to understand what the pressures are likely to be from the impact, the longer term impact of COVID, and you know how those work through in terms of demand led pressures. In terms of the financial position, the RJB has got a 18.2 million pounds worth of reserves, so that's leading from a 15.6 million pounds surplus in this year. 5.2 million of that is through trading, and 10.4 million of that is your funding that came late from the Scottish government. So in terms of that overall position, that's looking at a much rosier reserves position. In terms of your COVID impact, clearly there was a significant change from the budget position through the year. Additional funding was received of 18.8 million, 17.2 was direct funding to cover COVID costs, and 1.6 million is for funding indirect costs, things like prescribing and ongoing costs due to people having COVID. So those are the main headlines. In terms of our audit risks, we identified at the beginning of the year. So on page 10 of our report, there is always a significant risk from management override of controls. So within that, we've identified no specific circumstances which would indicate any overrides in the controls were identified. The second significant risk, there's an assumption that income recognition is a fraud risk by professional standards. As the income that you receive is derived from your main parties, we actually rebut that recognition risk. However, we are satisfied that the additional funding from the Scottish Government was recorded correctly, and that the other income is recorded in line with the CIPFA code. So again, no issues to report. In terms of the areas I've briefly mentioned for financial sustainability, again highlighting the movements in the year in terms of the funding regimes, and then also in terms of the medium-term view, we consider that the IGB is financially sustainable, although there is, as you say, still some pressures within that medium-term financial plan to work through in terms of identifying the savings or strategic changes needed. So I think we've covered all of those extra bits. And then finally, in terms of the wider scope and the best value, we're planning to give a clean opinion in terms of those parts of the audit. So financial sustainability is so there's 4 dimensions: financial sustainability, which we've covered off, governance and transparency. We consider that the arrangements are adequate in terms of the governance and transparency. In terms of value for money, we consider that the RJB has appropriate arrangements for using resources effectively, and then for financial management, that the RJB has strong controls over monitoring expenditure, with the budget and financial capacity is appropriate and is well supported by the leadership team. So in terms of audit adjustments, we've not identified anything that hasn't been reported to us as a audit adjustment. As you say, there was a late adjustment to the accounts that you're receiving next. However, that was identified through work within Aberdeen Council in terms of the group accounts work. So that's where that's coming from. So I think other than that, it's good news in terms of your financial position at the end of the year, and there's decisions to be made in terms of how those reserves will be spent. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. That was very full but succinct for us, so appreciate that. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a comprehensive run through, Matthew. That was actually very helpful. Couple of questions though. You mentioned all the Scottish Government funding that was promised as a consequence of COVID, funding consequences and all that has been received. Can we say, but maybe that's also for Alex, can we say that all the promised funding has now been received?
I think that's probably a better question for Alex, but I think yeah. We can, from what we've seen through the accounts, it's clear that the 10 million is money that was received from the Scottish Government.
Yeah, but there's been a couple of different tranches of funding though. It's hard to keep up with it all, actually.
Yeah.
Can we bring Alex in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were asked to submit local mobilisation plans throughout the year, and throughout the year reported that back to the IGB in the budget monitoring. And there was always a risk we felt around about the indirect costs, but at the end of the day, the direct and indirect costs were all fully funded by the Scottish Government, and that money came across. More money came across as well for COVID. So we've already got some funding in our reserves that we can use for the first 2 or 3 months of this year to fund things like payments to suppliers and so on. And there's an opportunity to go back to the Scottish Government and ask them for more if we think our payments are going to be higher than that within this period of time. So I think the Scottish Government has funded the additional costs of COVID on the IJB per the policy announcement, would be my view, on the basis of that and the additional funding that came in at the end of the financial year, which was really funding in advance for the costs of COVID in this financial year.
Thank you. May I ask another question, please, Chair?
Sure.
So jumping around a bit, I'm sorry, but there was a £500 payment that the Scottish Government announced. Has all that money? So I'm just presuming that money was actually just passed straight over from Scottish Government to Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership. Is that right?
Do you want me to take that one, Matthew?
You can, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a few aspects of the £500 payment. So there was £500 payment that was made to the NHS staff. That was passed to the NHS, and the NHS staff within the partnership were paid for that. There was £500 payment to council staff who were within the partnership, and that money passed into the council on an agency basis. So they were acting as the council's agent in the transfer of that money across to the staff from the Health and Social Care Partnership. There was £500 payment to the social care providers staff, and again that was passed through to the council, and they passed that on to the social care providers under an agency agreement. There's one £500 that hasn't been paid yet, and that's to the personal assistants, and work's being taken care of nationally to determine what the best mechanism would be for passing that money across to personal assistants who are employed via SDS packages.
Thank you. So a supplemental question to that. So there clearly was some administration that needed to be undertaken by the Health and Care Partnership. Do we know how much that cost? Or was that just that was just absorbed, was it?
Well, I think in relation to the £500, I mean, to say, for instance, the council or the NHS staff, my understanding is that was absorbed, but I wouldn't actually think that was much administration cost, because we should know what our staffing is, and that information should be coming from the staffing system. The £500 payments to social care providers, there would have been more costs as a result. There would have been greater administration costs if we had to go and verify these payments, but these payments were verified by Scott Excel for the whole country. So the amount of administration that Aberdeen City Council had to do in regard to these payments was minimal, because basically we got a list of how much we had to pay the providers, and as we were doing that on an agency basis, we passed that money across.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for this report? Okay, can I ask you, Matthew,
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying to raise my hand.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see that. Yes, I see it now. Councillor Cook, please go.
Thanks, it's a very minor one. On page, I think it's 22 of your report, one of the bits that's highlighted in red is suggesting a few extra wee words around internal audit, where some of the plan hasn't been delivered because of COVID. I think sometimes one suspects that people are using COVID as an excuse, but reading what's gone on there, if I'm reading your report correctly, it's basically saying pretty much everything that needed to be done has been done, apart from one or two bits. So I'm thinking that to me is entirely reasonable.
Yeah, I think the AGS has actually been updated in the revised statements that Alex has put in front of you. I think the point we were making was that the internal auditor will make his judgment based on not just the work he's done this year, but because he'll have a rolling program of work, so he'll have his history of findings. So I think he will have made his judgments including the work for this year that is done, which wasn't quite as much as he expected. However, he's still able to give that overall opinion on the arrangements in place. So I think we just wanted a little statement in there just to add a bit of context into that comment in the AGS, which I think was which Alex I think has done in the revised statements. So again, what we will do, we'll update this report when we actually finally issue the opinion, and then we'll make sure that the things are all aligned to exactly what was the actual final position in terms of the statements.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Okay, and
Chair.
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that has been included, but I noticed Colin's got his hand up, so it might be good just to bring Colin in at the moment. You're probably going to say that already, but just if you're having trouble with the hands.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Colin, can you come in, please?
Thanks. I think everyone summed that up very nicely there. Absolutely. Yes, we're taking assurance from our experience within the area and also our work with Aberdeen City Council, our wider work across there. Also our discussions with NHS Grampian's internal auditors, which we've had throughout the year. So generally we're satisfied. We would like to have done more, but obviously circumstances being what they've been, we haven't been able to do so, and we're picking that up again this year. Obviously, as we're rebuilding and so on, changing things, there may still be impacts on it. I'll give that further consideration throughout the year, but at the moment I'm happy, as I reported to you your last committee meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Colin. And these points are usefully cross-referenced in red in the audited accounts, so that's helpful. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, John. It was just to first off thank Matthew and the team and Alex Stephen about all the work that was done for this. And I suppose my question is just, is there additional professional advice that is offered as part of this process of doing the audit, or, like in terms of, strengthening the audit process, or how does that, work?
Yeah, if I take that, I think we at the end of each audit we will have a wash-up session with the finance team. We'll look at anything that's that we've, because we ask for quite a lot of information up front to allow the process to go as smoothly as possible. So we'll have a wash-up session and make sure that any lessons learned or anything which could be improved, we will go through that process and implement that for next year. If that's where you were wanting.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I think that does pick up on the various bits and pieces that were kind of just needing to be concluded in there, and we probably can take from that assurance for when we go on to look at the audited accounts. I've just got one other question for you, Matthew, and that's you mentioned about being satisfied around the capacity for finance support, and obviously we're going to be reviewing that in September. So presumably that then comes into next year's audit, does it, in terms of you having a further view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's from our side, it's a very high level review of that capacity, and a lot of that is driven from the fact that you've met your targets, you've delivered your budget on time, the reports are in line. So I think it'd be wrong for us to challenge or to question that full review of your capacity, because clearly there's a lot more to finance than just sort of feeding the information for auditors. But I think where we come to our sort of rounded conclusion is that you're not having problems with reports, you're not having problems, there's not issues coming out at the year end which you weren't aware of, sort of the indicators that things aren't working smoothly. And I suppose that's how we assess that wider scope is, you know, if all of the things are in place and are working, we'll say there is capacity. What we won't be saying is that is excess capacity and or people working very, very hard and, you know, would like more support and more capacity, and clearly pressures like that would very much could very well be in place underneath the it's the swan analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just to put in context your comment there, and then our future work on that. That's fine. And just before you go, I was going to ask under the next report just around the additional monies coming into the reserves, and so this may be more appropriate for the next report, but just as while you're here, so Alex can guide as to whether we park this until we go on to that report. And it was just, I'm assuming that the 2.8 million is an accumulation over those 3 years.
Yeah, so I think what we understand, and as you say, we've still got a little bit of checking on this to finish off. But I've spoken with Jonathan Belford at Aberdeen Council as well for his take of the information, and from what we understand is that it's he's received, but I wrote it down somewhere. Just hold on 1 second. Yeah, I think it's 1.7 prior year, so within the two, and then 1.1 for current year. So one of the tests we made sure was that it wasn't didn't need a prior year adjustment, because clearly correcting an error from a prior year would need, if it was material, would need what's called a prior year adjustment. That the 1.7 million, because we're looking at a materiality of 3.5 million in our audit, so it isn't a material misstatement at the brought forward position. So that allows you to account for it all in 2021, and then your income will be obviously higher in 2021. So it's all recorded as if it was income for 2021, and then it would then hit into your reserves at that point.
Okay, that's helpful. It just clarifies that part. Okay, thank you very much. So just ask the committee before Michael and yourself leave us. I think, are we satisfied with that report, and we're going to the recommendations on page 65 to note the report from our external auditor and the assurance we can take from this? I think that's approved by the committee. Okay, thank you. And thank you to you, Michael and Matthew, for your time today on that.
Okay, thank you.
Can we go to item 10 then, which is the audited accounts, also on the supplementary pack? Can I hand over to you, Alex?
Yep, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think in relation to the accounts you've got before you, there are some changes that we've made, and I've certainly highlighted those in yellow for you. So we had the payment from, or we had more information on the chief officer's pension, so we updated that, and we updated some of the notes around about the remuneration side of things. The other change in terms of the narrative was in relation to the internal audit change, and that was signed off by Colin before we put that in. And then the final change was in relation to the agency note, or not the final change, but there was a change in relation to the agency note, and that picks up on the discussion at the last paper where the council was acting as an agent of the government around about some payments who would traditionally have if they weren't acting as that, would have come through the IJB. The impact on the IJB was nil because the additional income and expenditure were both coming in. So I've highlighted that within the agency note as well. There has been a lot of guidance that's come out after we had published our accounts in relation to how to treat some of the government money that had come in, whether it was an agency or principal payment, and you know, we've reflected on that, and as a result, just to provide more information to users, we've added that little note in there. There may be further changes to that, I guess, as we go through and things start to firm up across Scotland, but certainly at the moment we're comfortable with the approach taken. The biggest change is highlighted in the previous paper was the £2.8 million of additional income that we identified, and we put that through, and that flowed through the whole of the accounts, and where that ended up was in the integration and change fund reserve. So we've now got more money in the integration and change fund reserve than we had when we came in with the unaudited accounts. We still need to make an assessment, I think, is about what we do with these reserves. But at the moment, whilst COVID has the implication it does on the accounts, I'm not proposing to rush in and start allocating these reserves to major projects. We may have a couple like we did at the last meeting of the IGB, where there was a short, you know, there was some computers and things like that to help the nursing teams, but I'm not proposing to do a wide scale allocation of the integration and change fund until I get more information about what's happening with COVID and with the COVID funding. So I'm taking a pretty prudent approach on that at the moment, given everything that's going on in the current context. That's my recommendations to the board, but will be picked up in the first monitoring report to the board, which will be going in August to the IGB. So, Chair, nothing further I want to add, just to thank the team and the auditors for pulling this together so quickly. As the auditor said in the previous paper, we are one of the first in Scotland to do this, and just to, I suppose, to give you some final assurance, having looked at some of the reserves across Scotland, we're not alone in having a larger reserve than what we did at the end of the financial year. I think it's consistent across the whole country that because the allocations are countrywide, that this has come through. So that's all I was going to say, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. And I think you've probably anticipated one or two questions in that, so that's very helpful. Can I open that up for Luann first?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Alex, to you and the team for producing this. I think the audit report is really an excellent narrative of what the IGB has been doing and what our intent is. It's such a good read, which is not something you can always say about audited accounts. So thank you for all the work and thought that's gone into that. I suppose just a question on the 2.8, the rental contribution that you mentioned. Was that a kind of one-off thing, or has there been learning from that to avoid those kind of things happening in the future?
Yeah, I think the 2.8 was just one of these circumstances where 2 or 3 things happened at the same time, and end up it was missed over a couple of years. But there will be a recurring element to that, so that's a positive in terms of we would expect that income to come in every year. I think the reason why it wasn't picked up sooner was that some other income in relation to client contributions of around about a similar amount was kind of looked like it was offsetting it. So when it was being looked at, that's what happened. So now that we've picked that up, the team are aware of that and are work their way through it just now. But that's kind of how that got missed out.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, hopefully just a one-off thing. Other thing I just wanted to ask about, this is maybe looking more to the future. We talk a lot about prevention and the need to do more upstream stuff. I'm wondering what's the thinking about. Would it be a helpful thing to look at our budget in terms of how much we're spending on prevention, how much we're spending on managing, sort of more emergency care, and set kind of, I don't even want to say targets, but set goals for how we want to move to prevention spend? Or is that not a helpful thing to do from a finance budget point of view, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a helpful thing to do as a kind of one-off exercise and then maybe kind of repeating it. But what I've found in the past when I've done that sort of exercises, there are a lot of allocations that need to be done across various headings. And you know, what fits where is sometimes a little, so there is a lot of assumptions and notional estimates that have to be made around about it. So I guess one of the things you could look at, and you could say public health is quite preventative in its approach. So public health, you might say, is 100% towards prevention, but then, you know, there'll be prevention, you know, you would then have to go through every budget holder's account and say to them how much of this is prevention and how much of it's reactive, and try and get some sort of process there. So that, you know, the information is reasonable in terms of giving you that kind of estimation about what you've been spending, but you do have to take it kind of with a pinch of salt if you did that, because of the level of estimation and that you would need to, and assumptions that you would need to make if you're actually doing that sort of thing. But certainly something we could have a look at. I mean, one of the things that you quite often see is traditionally the accounts are set in a way probably to mirror the financial the code of practice, or to mirror what's previously been done in terms of the management information that's been required. But once you get what your strategic objectives or intents are, then what you can do is you know, you can do a kind of exercise to try and map some of that across to kind of show where it is from there. And you know, organisations have done that in the past, and I've done it myself in the past. Okay, so yeah, something to be thinking about, but definitely not a silver bullet by any means to do that. I suppose what I observe is, if we want to do more prevention, the funding has to follow it. Otherwise, we just keep talking about it and we're not actually doing it. But yeah, there's maybe different ways to do that. Final question from me, or reflection really, is I think that one of the risks we have is that there could be a perception that the IJB is awash with cash because of the amounts that are sitting there just now. But when reading the detail very clearly, this is one-off money. We really, at this point, don't quite know what the demands are going to be this year. But when we go over this year, we'll still have the financial challenges that were there before COVID, the staffing issues, and in addition, we have the health debt built up during COVID and the ongoing COVID costs. So I'm just wondering about the narrative about the current financial position and how clear that's being sort of explained to staff and to our partner organisations, so that perception is absolutely knocked on the head. I'll just come in there. So Chair, in terms of you know, the NHS side, I mean, they're not allowed to carry forward reserves, but they are. Most of the reserves that have come in and that are earmarked on the NHS side, if you know what I mean. So stuff like PSIP and Action 15 and ADP would be health reserves. So they are aware of the situation. As I said at the outset, it's not an uncommon situation that we find ourselves in across Scotland. So there will be conversations about this going on nationally. On the council side, my understanding is that a similar position happened where funding was received and is required for next year, but impacted on the financial position this year. So I'm pretty clear that doesn't impact on future years. I think, as I said at the outset, we don't know what the future is going to look like at the moment. The social care system in particular is changing at pace. You know, we've seen more people getting taken care of at home rather than in residential, and we don't know whether people are going to now start wanting to go into residential or not, given the additional risks that are now perceived to be around about residential care that wouldn't have been there previously. We don't know what the impact of all of this is going to have on our finances going forward, and we've established a group to start looking at that so we can start forecasting what we think that's going to be. But the financial deficits are still there year on year, and we need to make provision to try and deal with that, and that's certainly something that we'll be doing through the rest of the year, and we'll be aligning that to our strategic plan and to our new strategic plan. So both of the strategic plan and the medium-term financial framework are going to go together this time, so that we can get some information out there, but then also start a kind of public consultation exercise around about what the strategic objectives are and how they may impact on the finances.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is that you, Luann? Yeah. Just before I bring in Councillor Cook, can I suggest that the point that was raised about the relative spend on prevention, etc., might be picked up within one of the workshops that we have around the strategic development. And interestingly, we've got there's a note about costs in the Operation Home First report, which has been asked to go in there, so we can reflect on the need to be paying attention to some of that as we go forward. So that's one point. And on that latter one, can I ask that Derek will just minute some words, because this is a public document for the minute, in relation to the amount of that 18 million, which is actually earmarked for expenditure, and that the rest of the reserves is a prudent position to be in, given the pressures that were identified and noted also by the external auditor. And that probably picks up for you, Luann, that helpful point of placing that in context. Okay, if I can ask Derek to do that. Can I bring in Councillor Cook?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I actually just had another suggestion for a future workshop. It's not actually on the numbers in the accounts themselves, but there's commentary on I think it's page 21 around the increasing use of Near Me and other digital stuff. I'm aware, and I guess others will be aware, that some people have queried the use of remote consultations. I think we accept it's not right for everybody. Certainly, I've long been a strong advocate of using more digital. My personal experience of using remote consultations has been absolutely fine. But since issues, since some questions have been raised, I wondered whether that might be a suitable workshop topic. Bringing in, I don't think it's something for us here in Aberdeen necessarily to try and reinvent the wheel, but maybe we could be looking at what people like the Cochrane collaboration have done around this, whether there's, to what extent there has been research into it. As I say, to my mind, I've long been an advocate of more digital, because it seems to make sense on a whole bunch of levels. But since there are questions, just a thought. And a final comment in relation to Luann's comment about not giving the impression we've got a fat pile of cash in reserve. I've certainly briefed my colleagues to the effect that there isn't a fat wodge of cash. It's not money resting in our account. It's pretty much earmarked. So don't think we can get away with underfunding.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Sure, it has brought a smile to Alex's face. Can I ask you to respond, Alex?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think that's a helpful suggestion to have a look at that in terms of a workshop environment. So certainly, something that we could have a look at, and I'll ask Carol to put something on the list around about that. And then we could have a discussion around about that. So I'm more than happy to do that, Chair.
Okay, yes, and I'm conscious that a number of members have been interested in that whole area, and the digital strategy is probably something that we can revisit, maybe ahead of the new strategy that we get. But we'll leave the officers to work out the timing and format for that. Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else signalling. If you are, and I can't see your hand, can you indicate? Okay, so on that basis, I just wanted to double check this, Alex. So with the extra 2.8 coming into our reserves, that's added to our 2.5?
No, we put, because the 2.5, when we went to the March meeting of the IJB, we had permission to move the risk fund back to 2.5 because that was down at 1.3. So the 2.8 I've put in the integration and change fund reserve, which is our reserve which we've used in the past for transformational activities. So that's sitting within there, and as I say, will be available to be used. But I think at the moment I would urge some caution, and just until we find out what's a little bit more certainty what's happening within the system.
Okay, and we'll come back to that, as you said, next next cycle. Okay, and then just to finally just check on the governance. There will be some, you didn't use the word tweaks to this, but there'll be some finalization of elements. In terms of governance, are those so minor that they don't need to come back in any way, or what?
Yeah, but they will be minor, but if they weren't, then I would come back. But I think there'll be changes of words and stuff like that. I'd be very surprised if the numbers change, but if there was a major movement, I would certainly bring it back to you to let you know that. But I think it's more likely to be, as I say, when the rest of the country kind of catches up, that Michael and Matt then need to react to some of the stuff that's happening in the wider environment, and that can mean some changes. Well, the final version of the accounts and the information here will be sent round to all the IJB members once it's finalised.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so if we can move to the recommendations, which is on page 3 of the supplementary pack. We've got 3 here. We're asked to consider and agree the accounts, which are attached to Appendix A, which I think we've now done, so we can agree with that. Instruct officers to submit those accounts to our key partners, and instruct the Chief Finance Officer to sign the representation letter. So we're happy to approve all those recommendations.
Yes, great.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I just again put on record, because it warrants it, acknowledge the timeline that the finance people have worked to, including our support through our auditors, but also just in handling the fluctuations through the year. It's been
John, we seem to have lost you, or I've lost you anyway.
Your mute's gone back on.
Mute's gone back on.
I can't hear John, but his mute sign doesn't appear to be on.
Yeah, I think he's
frozen, so his internet's obviously failed, doesn't it?
Oh, he's back again. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, this has happened the last couple of times I've been on. It's just frozen. I can hear everybody else. So just be careful what you say next time I freeze. Derek, was that what you were trying to signal for?
No, I was. I had a point to raise on the recommendations. I don't know if you want to give your update that you were mid-flow with, first of all, Chair.
Okay. It was just 2 points. One, acknowledging the timeline and that all the finance people and the support through audit have worked to, and also the fact that they've had to handle quite significant fluctuations through the year, which has been quite, an exceptional year. So just acknowledging that from the committee. Thank you. Derek.
Yes, Chair, thank you. If I can suggest that following the discussions on this paper, there is an additional recommendation that the committee instruct the Chief Finance Officer to review the digital strategy via workshop facilities at a future date.
Okay, Alex, you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Chair.
Okay, that's fine.
And Chair, just while I'm here, can I just thank Alison and Martin because and Carol, because they've all done a lot of work on the accounts as well. So it's not just the finance team and the numbers. Some of the wider team have been involved in it, and I just really want to acknowledge that as well.
Yes, so if you can adjust that, Derek, to appropriate wording of the senior team.
It's adjusted.
Yeah. Don't miss anybody out, for goodness sake. No, it's very helpful to us in our governance role, and we do appreciate that side. Luann, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, and it kind of follows that point, really. The narrative is so helpful for giving a very good overview of the IJB. I just wanted to check, will this routinely just be shared with all IJB members once it's signed off and completed? Because I think it's a really important document for everyone to see.
Yeah, given that this is being done at RAP, so last year we did it at the IGB, so there wasn't a requirement to do it. But this year, because it's been done at RAP, we will circulate it to all members, board members.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, let's move on to item 6, which is the Justice Social Work Performance Management Framework. So do we have Kevin here?
Yes, we do. Good morning, Chair.
Thank you. If I hand over to you, Kevin, to introduce this.
Okay, thank you very much. So with respect to the Justice Service Performance Framework, it was one of the first projects initiated by the in-house Programme Management Board when it was established some 2 years ago, and work was sufficiently progressed with respect to the framework to enable us to submit it to the Care Inspectorate as part of the inspection supporting evidence last year. And it was no surprise when one of the 2 recommendations asked for the framework to be completed and implemented. And so that's what was done in respect of the Inspection Action Plan, topping and tailing the work that was required around the framework to get it ready for implementation within the service. There's a lot of data within justice social work. There's been a lot of discussions previously, but I suppose one of the drivers around the PMB discussions around the need for a framework was about making those discussions more coherent and coordinated. And that's what we envisage happening once this framework is up and running and in place, that the service discussions at a service manager, senior social work level will be more coordinated. And then the exception reporting to the PMB, chaired by Claire as the lead for social work, will also be more coherent and coordinated than perhaps was the case previously. The challenge for us in the service, it's a diverse service. There's an IJB workshop coming up and the delivery plans coming to the IJB's next meeting, so you'll get a sense of the service complexity and diversity. The challenge for us was getting a small set of KPIs that were applicable to that diversity, to that complexity, without running the risk of losing anything from the story, as it were. So this is what we've came up with in discussions with Leslie, the service manager, and our in-house data analyst. And looking at the framework itself, the table 1.1 in the appendix, I would also highlight a couple of columns there. There is the objectives columns. So these are the objectives which are in the delivery plan, which the service is going to be tasked with working towards over the next few years. And then the outcomes, performance and improvement framework indicators, which is the Care Inspectorate's framework. And so that shows an alignment with those indicators and the indicators that we have come up with to meet the key objectives. So that's what's been developed. We recognise it's a first iteration. There may well be other refinements in due course, depending on our conversations at a service level and at the PMB, but it does give us a starting point to take things forward. Happy to take questions and queries.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Claire, did you want to add anything at this stage?
Hi, good morning. I suppose I would just add, as Kevin said, you know, it's very complex criminal justice, and we are working under quite a number of kind of national and drivers. So we have, and I think what the document does do is we need to report on our statutory duties and that we're meeting our statutory duties. We have to take in the national outcomes and standard for justice social work, so we need to show that we're meeting them. You've obviously got our community justice improvement plan, which is part of the LOIP. You've then got that framework from Community Justice Scotland, and as Kevin says, you have the Care Inspectorate framework, so quite a complex national picture, and a lot of obviously frameworks to show our outcomes. So I think, as Kevin says, that the PMB has strengthened the governance around that, and this document just makes us really focused on, are we meeting all of our objectives? Are we meeting our statutory duties? And obviously, are we meeting the national frameworks? So it is obviously our first iteration of this. I think as we move through, it will evolve. One of the things that obviously we're keen on is to see the outcomes for people and the kind of more narrative around that. So and that comes from our exit questionnaires. So there is an ability as we move on from the exit questionnaires, really reviewing, because we already review the information, but we will, I suppose, we'll evolve on how do we then evidence that throughout our exit questionnaires. So that will be added in, and that's something that we're working on in terms of that personal outcomes for people rather than all the national drivers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, thank you for that. So that's the report set well in context there for us. Can I open it up for questions from the committee? Luann.
Thanks, and thanks, Claire and Kevin. Really welcome this report. I think for me, in terms of getting assurance, it's difficult to understand, from an IJB perspective, we would need to see that in context of the benchmarks. I think that's maybe what Claire, what you were alluding to with all these other standards, because a percentage of, whatever completed or numbers of people doesn't give us assurance that that's very good or it's improving. Or so for an annual report, it would be helpful to see what we expected that to be, or what the national benchmark is, or where we were last year, or something that gives context so that we get a bit more assurance that these are improving data or whatever. And also, just agreeing with your point, Claire, I suppose the big important thing for us is how this is actually improving people's lives. And I think that actual human stories would be really important to see in an annual report to bring this to life, because it is really complex. And the people that you're supporting have complex backgrounds. So that would be my ask, is just we would need context for it to be to get assurance from the activity data, but also probably human stories would really bring it to life, and that outcomes focus is really important. But thank you. Good work, I think, on this.
It was some of the indicators are derived from the self-evaluation that we submitted as part of the inspection process, and we did include baseline data, and it was what the data was telling us that showed we had a bit of work still to do in respect of some areas. And you might recall from the inspection report, there was a narrative around the risk assessments and about our consistency in respect of that, for example. And that's why some of those indicators are now included as part of our framework. But again, Luann, you're right, in our reporting, we would show baseline and obviously trends of recent years in respect of those particular indicators.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
You've gone mute again, John.
I think that's me out now. Councillor Dunbar, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was, I suppose it's kind of building on some of Luann's comments in terms of the challenge of trying to, I suppose, like a lot of your clients, have experienced or have adverse childhood experiences, and a lot of trauma out of that. A lot of people that end up certainly in prison, fit that pattern. And how part of the service, I think, is an offer to enable and empower clients to really become assets to their community. but the challenge, if that's a journey, it's like how the challenge of how you show those outcomes for people. And I wondered if you could just maybe give me a bit more around that.
I'll come in, Kevin, and then you can come in after. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Dunbar, and through the Community Justice Group, there has been a lot of discussion of how do you show the outcomes, how do you show the impact that you're making to somebody, especially it's difficult in justice social work because people are only open for the time they're on their order. So you could say that, you know, they've successfully completed their order, they've completed their programme of work. We then think, well, how do we then track them? Because if they don't come back, then you think, well, that's positive because they haven't come back into the justice system. But it's really difficult to track that outcome. So it's something that we speak about in the Community Justice Group of how do we collectively as partners do that to really show the impact that we're making to people's lives. And one of the our stretch outcomes for our Community Justice Improvement Plan, which is incorporated into the law, is around to avoid that reconviction within 1 year of people being on orders. So, and it is, as I say, we can track it that they're not being known to police again and they're not coming into justice social work. But again, it's really difficult of how you evidence all this, and that's what we've been grappling with. And you're right, there's a lot of trauma in our justice clients, and that trauma-informed workforce training that we're rolling out nationally for justice. It's really recognised that we're really pushing for this trauma-informed workforce to work with the people, not just in justice, obviously across all our services.
Thank you.
I would also say that a refinement we've made to the delivery plan in recent weeks following some staff workshops has been around how we capture the feedback from individuals who've been disengaged from the service. We've got information about those who have completed their orders, who have worked with us, who have moved perhaps onto other things, and that's a small subset of the wider cohort. But there are always some who, for some of the reasons you've outlined, Councillor Dunbar, the trauma experiences and such like, have not engaged with us from the outset. Their journey with us has not been as positive and as productive, and it's how we capture their views to inform our practice and our attempts to establish those working relationships with, if not them, then with others who are in similar circumstances in the future. An important point, though.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'm aware it's a great challenge engaging some clients because of their, previous experiences and trauma. But it's really good to hear about these ways in which you're looking to address them. Thank you.
You're mute again, John.
Oh, John, you're mute. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to have to leave this on. I think it's a problem. Councillor Cook, were you signalling?
Sorry, John. No, it was careless mouse use.
Okay.
So it was an accidental hand raise.
Okay, that's fine. So I don't see anybody else signalling. My questions were going to be similar to what's already raised around the performance reporting around impacts, etc. And I think we've had a good discussion around that. What I'm going to take us to the recommendations in a moment. Just bringing up on my computer here. What I'm going to suggest is that we perhaps just amend the first recommendation to approve the performance management framework and agree to its implementation by the Justice Service. Can I add in as a first iteration a note that it is a work in progress? If we can include that, because I think that then picks up on the discussion in relation to developing what we can around the impacts. What I do think is that the committee is assured from what I've heard in the discussion there, and certainly for myself, like Kevin was describing, the use of the data is what's important, and I was really pleased to hear that approach. And if we're going to receive a further report in a year's time, so that's the second recommendation here. So I think we're assured that you can be working on this as a work in progress, and it may come back in an even stronger position when we see it again. So on that basis, can we approve these recommendations and then that addition to the first one? Is that clear for you, Derek?
It is indeed, Chair. Thanks, I've got that captured.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your time at the committee today. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
Can we go on to item 7, which is the delivery of the leadership team objectives, and hopefully Alison can get contact with us. And perhaps,
yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yay! I do apologise for that earlier on. I bought myself a fancy webcam, and I think it's just been one piece of technology too far for my computer. So I've now disconnected it. So you probably won't be able to see me terribly well, but if you can hear me, that's the main thing.
Okay, can I just, while we remember, can we go back to that previous point around the business planner? Did you hear what was being said at that point?
I heard some of it. So I understand that there's a line 13 on the business planner that refers to strategic objectives. And I think Martin's name is against the report author, but I think there was a little bit of confusion perhaps between that and the leadership team objectives, because I'm not entirely sure what we're referring to in terms of strategic objectives, because we don't tend to have strategic objectives in our strategic plan. We have strategic aims, we have commitments, and we have priorities. So I'm not sure. I did try to have a look at the minute from the 27th of April, but I couldn't see from that minute what was intended there. I mean, we certainly are going to refresh the strategic plan, and we will have refreshed strategic aims, commitments and priorities from that. So I don't know if that's what we were looking for, or if it was something along the lines of the leadership team objectives. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, what I suggest is when you get a chance, if you can just look at that bit in the business planner, and then maybe just drop the committee a note just to say whether that's lines being removed or just to explain it. That would be fine, rather than take up time just now.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So if we can go on to your report here, would you like to introduce this report?
Yes, thanks. So this report is in relation to the leadership team objectives, and the objectives for this financial year for 2021-22 were agreed at the IJB in March as part of the medium-term financial framework paper. It was an appendix to that paper, and I've reattached that appendix as Appendix A to this report just for ease of reference. And this report outlines the arrangements put in place to ensure delivery of these objectives is progressed, and the detail of that is contained in Appendix B. The leadership team objectives will be the main focus of leadership team activity this year, and that will incorporate our contributions to the likes of Operation Home First and to the local outcome improvement plan. And our aim going forward with the refresh strategic plan is that we will try to identify year by year our leadership team objectives to deliver that plan overall. So this would be our new way of working, our new focus going forward. And what we are planning to do is to bring performance reports against the delivery of the leadership team objectives to each of the next 3 meetings of this committee this financial year, and that will cover all of our reporting on performance. We have added an additional appendix to this report. Appendix C is just a map of all the performance indicators that we have in the strategic plan and how they link to either the delivery of the leadership team objectives, delivery of Operation Home First, and delivery of the local outcome improvement plan. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Alison. Can I open it up for questions, please? I don't see anybody signalling. Luann, yes.
Thanks. I suppose my first question is just the new portfolio approach that's been taken by NHS Grampian and how that impacts or how that's been built in to these to this plan would be my first question, Alison.
So absolutely, the new portfolio approach identifies additional personnel on our leadership team. So we have 6 people on our leadership team from the Division of Medicine and Division of Unscheduled Care within NHS Grampian. So they are now part of our leadership team, and they have been allocated across the leadership team objectives, and we have incorporated activities that they are they have identified are key for them. So likes of a review of urgent care is one of the projects within the huddle activities. So we've absolutely tried to map that across as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Bell and then Councillor Cook.
Well, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Alison, you say that you want to identify where Lean Six Sigma could improve efficiencies across the system. So I understand Lean Six Sigma as applied to healthcare as sort, simplify, sweep, standardise, and self-discipline, the 5 S's. So could you perhaps give an example of just one S?
Sort of, I might need a reminder of all the S's.
Sort, simplify, sweep, standardise, self-discipline.
Yeah. So I guess there's a number of projects, and one of our the aim in the leadership team objective is actually to identify areas where Lean Six Sigma could help. But I guess an example of a simplification project that we've already undertaken could be the implementation of the Morse module into the health visitor. So they're now, instead of trawling through paper records and having to go back and forwards to paper files, everything, they've now got an online tool that helps them both access records and record information while they're mobile, while they're out and about, and we have plans to extend that to other aspects of community nursing.
Thank you, and that's a great use for digital. That really is a good use. So a couple more questions, please. So and this is just with reducing costs, I think. So the report says reduce locum costs. So there's also mention of improving staff welfare. So the two clearly go hand in hand, don't they? So what's your approach to that, to improving staff welfare, for instance? So there's less lost time, basically.
Yeah, so the approach there will be to look at each of the areas and understand what the absence rates are and the reasons for the absence rates. We are also looking at a lot of psychological help. We understand a lot of the absence is down to stress or impact on staff mental health and well-being. So we're looking at putting a lot of online and other support in there for staff to help them to cope with the stress and perhaps maintain being at work easier than they perhaps have in the past. And we're also looking at staffing structures. We're looking at mapping forward the demand and looking at the workforce and the capacity that we have in the workforce and seeing if there are gaps and trying to do what we can, as well as perhaps introducing some of these digital systems that we've talked about already. You know, if there are ways that we can meet the increased demand that we know is coming, but with the same workforce, or indeed if we have to move our resources around to ensure that staff are able to do their jobs comfortably, you know, that they can come to work, they can do a shift, and they can go away, feel it with that sense of job satisfaction, rather than, you know, worry about, you know, what's happening, or having to deal with staff shortages, and, you know, maybe having to work longer hours or whatever, you know, because we don't have the right staff in the right place.
Thank you. That's helpful. So, so a final question then. So, that is good. So, does that view of the way the care partnership wants to operate and is actually transforming into, does that news get out to the wider health community, such that people come and knock on your door to say, oh, I know that Alison McLeod is a damn good egg, and we know that the system is working really rather well. We want to come and work for you because we're sick and tired of doing overtime and you know, feeling really not terribly great. You know, perhaps a slightly silly question, but.
So we would like to get that message out there. We probably don't have it out there at the minute, but what we are doing is we are working with young people and looking to encourage them into a role in health and social care. And I think what we're trying to do with this objective is to ensure that the workplace, when these people come into the workplace, is somewhere that we can keep them, you know, that they will want to be and that they will want to stay. So there's a number of career mentoring schemes and you know, some promotional schemes out there into schools and other you know, colleges, further education, to encourage staff to come and work for Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership. And that will our approach to supporting staff will feature in our strategic plan and will feature in a lot of the material that we put out there. So it will definitely be our watchword.
Thank you. Helpful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just a query on page 36, Appendix A, in terms of relations with communities. I just wondered whether we needed an additional work stream on communication, PR, education, in the sense that a lot of the stuff we're doing is, again, you know, why are we using more electronic communications? What are we asking people to do in terms of the local engagement groups, getting people to take more responsibility for their own health, etc., etc. Just wondered whether we needed an additional work stream on that in the objectives.
So we did have a discussion on this, you know, whether there was a separate work stream or not, and where we actually got to was that communication should really be part of every project, you know, so there should be a communication aspect to each of that, and what we're trying to do in the arrangements, the huddle arrangements for delivery of the projects. We've got the flash reports and the sit reps, which will have communications about how the individual projects and programs are working. So rather, we felt if we had a separate work stream for communication only, people would perhaps say, oh, well, communication is that work stream or that person's job, whereas actually we want it to be everybody's job. Everybody should be the mouthpiece and the comms for the work that we're doing.
Thanks. That makes complete sense. I thought I'd ask the question, but I'm totally satisfied with the answer. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've got Luann coming in again.
Sorry, I had another question I forgot to ask.
That's fine.
It's a more a reflection. A number of the headings, I don't see quality measures for them. So by that I'm meaning, you know, assurance that the activities that we're doing are actually the right thing for the public. So I just wondered if, I mean, and the ones so the staff one's really good. There's got stuff about staff feedback in it, but the one whole system and connected remobilisation, reshaping relationships with communities, living with COVID, none of them have, that I could see, very clear things that are about a feedback loop from the public. So how do we know that all those activities are actually going in the right direction and we're not getting more complaints or there's no more adverse events? Or so it was just a reflection on, was that considered, or is that kind of detail underneath these plans?
Yeah, so the examples of performance measures that you've got in the appendix there are in the main quantitative, sorry, but we will have qualitative measures as well. And what we are doing is we're asking each of the projects and each of the programmes to develop these themselves. But what we do have over and above that is the health and care experience survey, the biannual survey that's undertaken, plus we also have our local survey, which will take that temperature check of overall how are people feeling about the services that we're delivering. What we're trying to do as well is not experience that consultation fatigue as well, you know, that you can the more and more you ask people about how they're feeling, the less and less you actually get an accurate response to that, because people are fed up being asked. So we know we have those high level experience surveys in the pipeline. There will be one undertaken at the turn of the year, the health and care experience survey will start about October, November time, and we'll get the results of that April, May next year, and then our own local survey will be repeated about June, July next year. So we will have those temperature checks to tell us what people feel about the services that we're delivering.
Okay, thanks, Alison. And I wasn't suggesting we should be asking people, it's more just using what's already out there in the system. What are the signals that we're doing the right thing, and paying attention to them. But yeah, maybe it's those surveys that will give us those temperature checks. But yeah, really important anyway that we consider those. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have our national performance indicators, our MSG performance indicators, and our own local performance indicators. So some of these will give us information as well.
Okay, thank you. Don't see anybody else signalling. Yeah, can I thank you for this report? I'd had the opportunity as chair to see an earlier version, and I was very grateful for Alison to include that final appendix C, into this report. I think what it what this does is show how things can start to be connected and brought together across the strategic plan. You've got the leadership objectives, the LOIP, performance indicators, but I would see this as a work in progress in terms of starting to bring that together and within the new strategic plan. So my question there is, as you report on each of the next 3 cycles, is that a fair expectation on our part as a committee that we'll see this increasingly come together in a coherent way?
Absolutely, John. Yes, that we're, as I say, we've started with some high-level performance measures that we would like to be able to report on, but we're very much handing it over to the project teams who will be delivering and asking them to identify as they go any additional measures that they would see would be meaningful to report. So I would very much see this developing over time.
Good. Okay. Well, I think for us as a committee, how you go about putting this together is an operational matter, and that's fine. Our job is to be assured on the way that you're going about that, and I think we can, just with that understanding and expectation, that we'll see this develop over the next 3 cycles. So on that basis, it's really very welcome, I think. So if we can go to the recommendations on this at page 29. Just pull that up. We have 2 of them here, noting the arrangements in the report and the accompanying appendices for the delivery of the objectives and the monitoring of progress, and then instructing the Deputy Chief Officer to submit progress reports to each of our next 3 meetings. Are we happy to approve that and on that understanding of the expectations of this developing over that period? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for that, Alison. I'm just conscious of the time here. Do people want to get a 5-minute comfort break before we go on, or are you happy to keep going? Any views on that?
Yeah, a break would be good.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate just now. So I've got 11:32 on my computer here. Is 5 minutes long enough, or do you want to come back at 11:40? Make it 11:40. You can get a comfort break and a cup of coffee. Okay. Derek, if you can do the needful for the recording, and I'll see you back at 11:40. Thanks.